Congratulations, you're an influencer. But don't get too heady because it's a pretty big club, as everybody influences someone else sometime, directly or indirectly. Hi, I'm Doug Caldwell, editor at Bizgnus Interviews. And we ask the question, when it comes to influencers, what about faith? How does faith factor into influencing? Answering that is our guest on this edition of Bizgnus Interviews. He's Brian Ahearn. He's an international keynote speaker, trainer, coach, and consultant, and the Chief Influence Officer at a company called Influence People LLC. Here's the Bizgnus Interview with Brian Ahearn. Brian, let's start, if you wouldn't mind, by telling our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself, that 60-second elevator pitch.
Okay. Well, I spent the entirety of my career in the insurance industry. It's a wonderful industry. Even met my wife there. And I came in contact with Dr. Robert Cialdini's work back in 2003. And through a series of events, met Dr. Cialdini, became one of his certified trainers. There's only a dozen of us in the world. And I knew this was what I would do with the rest of my career. And I made the decision 7 years ago to leave the insurance company and pursue Influence People full time. And what I do is speak, train, coach, consult, and write about the science of influence.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I suppose during the course of one's life, you influence at least a couple of people every now and again, perhaps without even knowing it. So how is that casual influencing different from the capital I influencer we know today?
Well, I like to tell people influence happens from womb to tomb. My wife is downstairs right now watching our 5-month-old grandson, Emmett. And Emmett has no words and no concept of what the sky is, the sun, the moon, or whatever, but he has needs and he has a way of influencing us to meet those needs, right? And then, of course, we grow and we learn language. We learn other things that help us convey what we want, what we need, what we desire in an attempt to get those things. So people are influencing whether or not they realize it. What we talk about with the science of influence is that there are research-proven ways to approach individuals that can make success much more likely. And when we understand what the science says and we put it into practice ethically and correctly, it can be much easier for those people to say yes to us. And I like to say then, when you are strategically thinking about influence, you will enjoy more success at the office and more happiness at home, because that tends to come about when people say yes to us.
In the broad world, how is being an influencer different or the same as advertising, public relations, or something like that?
Influencers are different than what I do. I think with modern technology, what certain brands recognized was there were people who had a following in the demographic that they were looking at. And if they could get those individuals on board to promote their products or services, they would have direct access to their target market. There's a whole evolution, obviously, to the influencer marketing. A lot of it is that self-revealing, I'm here today at this place, and people just are connected. And so whatever they're talking about and doing, other people want to talk about and do. And that is a combination of social proof, but also authority. If they are a trusted expert, then it becomes easier for people to start following them.
Are people easily converted into followers by people who have some charismatic charm? It would seem so over the course of history, but how does that affect things these days?
Sure, there is something to charisma. Two people can say the same thing, and one person is all of a sudden followed and the other person isn't, which is not unlike the principle of authority, which says we're more likely to follow the lead of an expert. I've often shared the story with audiences where I had talked with my wife, who loves golf, and I had shared with her a golf example that I had used during a training event. Weeks later, Doug, she's reading a book on golf And she turns to me and says, listen to what Corey Pavin wrote. And she reads this paragraph. It's almost exactly what I had told her, the psychology behind something. So I said, I told you that. And she said, no, you didn't. And I go, yeah, a couple of weeks ago. She had no recollection because I am not considered an authority when it comes to golf. But Corey Pavin, US Open winner, he is an authority. So that's an example where two people can say the same thing. 100% is true coming out of my mouth as it was what he wrote on the pages, but he's followed. And I think charisma is also along those same lines. We can all think of people out in society who tend to get people following them, even when they're doing things incorrectly, just because of the sheer power of their charisma.
Is it something that we need to be teaching in school as children grow up, how to recognize influencers and be able to evaluate from a disinterested point of view whether to follow or not?
I think that's really important. I often tell audiences when I'm talking about influence as an everyday skill, and that once they start seeing the opportunities to use it, they'll be amazed at how often it's at play. Most of the time when I'm talking, people start recognizing almost immediately, like, oh, that's how the car salesman got me to buy the car. Or maybe they think on a personal level, I didn't have a label for it, but I do that thing Brian's talking about all the time. That's why people respond to me. So to help people avoid being taken advantage of, and that was a big basis of Robert Cialdini's book, Influence. There was always at the end of every chapter ways to defend yourself against people who are trying to manipulate you. So it would do people well to understand these principles, not only so they can be more successful, but so they're not taken advantage of.
You have authored what, three books now, or is it more than that? I can't keep track.
I have on influence. I've authored three books, and I've got one coming out in November. And then I wrote a book wholly separate from what I do for business, but about my relationship with my father and his time in the Marines in Vietnam.
And tell us about your book that's coming out. What's the name of it and what we should look forward to reading in?
So the book is called Influenced from Above, where faith and influence meet. And the idea for the book came when my daughter asked me a question many years ago. She had seen me present here in town. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And so we went to lunch the next day and talked about the presentation. And then she asked the question that became the genesis for the book. And it was, God or Dad, what I want to know is, where is God in all this? All this psychology you teach, where does he fit into the equation? And we had a wonderful conversation about where I saw like spiritual truths supporting these principles of persuasion. So I decided I would write a book about it, and I got going on it earlier this year, and it should, like I said, it should be out in October. When Dr. Cialdini did a pre-read on the book, he gave me incredibly high praise because he said, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a book where it's trying to connect spiritual truths to the truths that we know about influence through research. So I'm very, very excited to get it out into the world.
How are those connected? As I think back over all the sermons I've listened to over the past umpteen years, I don't recollect that ever coming up.
Well, I'll give you a couple examples. And these came up when I was talking with my daughter. I said, Abigail, in the business world, we can't necessarily talk about love. But this principle of liking, if I employ it the right way, it's not about me getting you, Doug, to like me. It's about me coming to know and like you. And the important thing with that is when I look at you and say, friend, well, I work longer, harder, and I'm more creative working for my friends. I will put forth so much more of myself for people that I consider friends. And so I told my daughter, I said, we're getting pretty close to love when we're doing that. Another example that I gave her, reciprocity, right? I do something kind for you, Doug. You feel like you should do something in return. Well, Jesus told us it's better to give than receive, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's encouraging us to take the first step. So the book really starts looking at all the different principles and where are there spiritual truths that really support these, that humans, in a sense, have known for thousands of years, But now we have research that can also show how powerful it can be.
How has writing that book changed your outlook on life?
I think the biggest thing I'm taking away from this is over my time working with Cialdini's material, I've gone to different levels. At first, I learned the principles and I could see application for utilizing them. And then, as an example, I began to learn how important the principle of liking was, that it went beyond me getting you to like me. It was about me liking you, right? So that started taking things to a deeper level. When I can look at somebody and say friend, it changes how I start using the rest of the principles, right? So my giving isn't transactional just to get you to do what I want. My giving is because I genuinely want the best for you, my friend, and that's how you receive it. And so we've moved away from transactional to relational just by what I choose to do. In writing the book, I think what has gone on is going even deeper than that and recognizing that as important as it is for people to have success in their career and happiness at home, I think there's an opportunity to have an eternal impact on people. And so now I've gone to a much deeper level in terms of how I think about and how I put into practice what I understand about influence.
As you look ahead into the future, next 5, 10 years, where do you see the influencer industry, if I could use that phrase?
Mhm. It's a really challenging question because things are changing so fast with AI that it's going to be hard to predict because AI can obviously help us be more influential. I mean, we're seeing people who are writing marketing copyright or resumes or all the kind of things that we are used to doing to try to get people to say yes to us in some form or fashion. But I think nothing ever replaces human to human contact, I don't think. Now, I can't have contact with you necessarily because we're not like in the same room to shake hands or pat you on the back or something like that. Um, but I think the human to human interaction is going to become much more important in the same way that while some people complain that texting dumbed down the younger generation, they can't spell, they use short and blah, blah, blah. The ones who have learned how to interact with people in a one-on-one, can speak in front of a group, look you in the eye, shake your hand, all those things, those people rise to the top. And I think there's going to be the same kind of evolution with human interaction in a world of AI.
Brian, what would you like to add, or it could be anything that we haven't talked about?
Um, well, the book, I will tell people that the book is different from a lot of other books in that it's a story format. So it's like a business parable. And it's a follow-up to a book that I wrote years ago called The Influencer: Secrets to Success and Happiness. And that book ended with the main character, John Andrews, retiring, but he's only in his mid-50s, so he's got a whole life ahead of him. And I decided to take him and use him as the basis of teaching the connection between influence and the spiritual principles because he's retired, but he realizes there has to be more to life than just enjoying the fruits of his labor. You know, nice vacations are wonderful and playing golf, those are good things, but that can't be the sole focus of the rest of your life. And so he's looking for purpose, and in the story gets involved with his church in a building a community center. And so he has to straddle the line of dealing with people within a congregation, which can be very different than dealing with people in business, but also then the secular world, dealing with like city council and zoning boards and things. And so he's having to marry what he knows about influence and what he also understands about his faith and bring those two together so he can be most effective in helping this project come to life.
Well, one last question from me, and that is, do you have a website?
I do. It's influencepeople.biz, B-I-Z. And if people go out there, I've been on a couple hundred podcasts, there's videos, there's links to the books, been blogging weekly for more than 15 years now, so that's a lot of writing. So there's a tremendous number of free resources out there. And if anybody goes and signs up for the blog, they will get a link to a free ebook that I wrote. It's only about 50 pages, but it will introduce them to influence via a story format, and it's called The Game of Influence.